I am sitting here with a advanced reading copy of my new book, Like a River. I'm new to writing books, but I'm not new to making albums. And so usually when I make an album, I will take the album itself like this and before it comes out, and I'll talk about each song, each track. We call it a track by track. And I'll say where I wrote the song and how we recorded it and the story behind it. And I thought it might be helpful to take this book and do the same thing with the chapters. So there's 12 chapters. I thought we could take Like a River and just kind of walk through it like I would a song, tell you the story behind it. So chapter 1, it's called The Water's Edge, and decided that this book called Like a River should start with river and should start with losing river. And as difficult as that is, I feel like it is a big hinge for the book. It is the introduction to the book, really. And so I figured that chapter 1 should just get right into it. We should just talk about the pool and talk about me finding river. And so as difficult as it is, I think when you first get this book and you open it up and the first line of the book is, "Soak in this moment because it won't last forever. It was the last thought I remember having before everything changed." So that's how we're going to start the book. And we're going to go into some detail on that day. And it was in June of 2019 when we lost Riv. This is going to say the exact circumstance, all of the details involved and who was involved with it whenever we lost him. Now this book is not linear, meaning it doesn't start with Riv and go straight down to present day. It's that storyline is going to kind of weave through all of the chapters, and you might see what I mean as I talk about it a little bit. But this was as it says right here, a loss too deep for words. And so it was hard to write this chapter. And it was the first chapter I wrote for the book. It was the first writing process I had for this entire book, and went right into it, pulled the Band-Aid off and told the story in extreme detail like I've never been able to or told anyone before. I end chapter 1 with an image that you'll just have to read it, but the way that this chapter ends is, it's still, the irony in that is still pretty overwhelming for me. One thing this book is going to do too, and part of what it does at the end of this chapter is it's going to bring my situation back to you, and it's going to take the mirror and turn it towards you. So whatever kind of loss or heartache or tragedy or difficult, struggling circumstance that you're going through, hopefully a huge purpose of this book is to be able to take my story, which is very specific to me, and take it and give it to you and say, here's what I did. How do you fit into this story with your own struggle? And if you're not struggling right now, we're all humans. You will. Chapter 2. Title of this chapter is called Our Forever Home. And that is a term that Amber and I used for the home that we were living in when we lost Riv. We thought that was our forever home. We almost bragged about that in a way that's like, well, we don't ever want to be anywhere else. We just love it here. We're going to be here forever. This is our forever home, our dream home. We are here forever. We're going to watch the kids graduate high school. We learned in that situation that we no longer have a forever home on earth. We no longer have anything that we could hang on to earthly that we say that will last forever. And that's the whole situation for us, really put that into a good perspective for us. I think a healthy perspective for us. This chapter is going to go into me needing to move, me needing to find what I call a landing pad, and our journey out of our forever home into the unknown, into a world that we had no idea what we're going into. And that includes going into therapy. That includes me beginning to do anything I can to try and heal myself. And that's a theme throughout this book, is me trying desperately to heal myself. And as I was plunging further and further, I was getting worse and worse, and everything I tried was actually making it worse. That's going to be a theme that we see, and that's a big part of this book, is my journey through loss and grief, and here's what I did, here's what didn't work, and here's what did work. That's what this book is going to tell you, hopefully. My PTSD was tremendous, and it would be hard for me to ever tell this story without mentioning the specific details of my PTSD. Chapter 2 is going to talk about that. Chapter 3, it's called The Show Must Go On. A lot of you know this chapter because you lived it with me. This is when I decided it was time to go back to work. It's time to go back on tour. This is going to be a journey that as you read this, you'll realize, a lot of you, if you're fans of me, or if you're fans or were fans of my music, you might read this chapter and go, I was there. I was at that show. I thought he was doing good. He was smiling. I thought I was proud of him for handling the loss of River so well. But then you're going to read this and go, but he wasn't. I was faking it. And I was performing my music on stage, and I was performing my attitude behind the scenes. And I think a lot of you bought it. I was pretending, and I got really good at it. I got really good at putting on a smile, but it was a lie. It says here on this page, the truth is, everyone is hurting from something. Even the people you think have it all together. That is so true. Chapter 4 is called When Self-Help Stops Helping. And this is a message I just want to take a megaphone and scream loudly from the rooftops, because my journey, it's one of the many things I hope you get out of this book. I hope you could hear me, that when I hit rock bottom, and as I was going down from the loss of Riv, through my grief, I want you to know through this chapter 4, that I tried everything to heal myself. I was extremely eccentric. I was eccentric before the loss, and afterward, I just doubled down on self-help. I doubled down on reading. I've got a lot of these books are behind me, but I was reading a lot of self-help. I was learning to wake up early and meditate and visualize, read devotions, and I was listening to podcasts, I was exercising, I was counting every calorie, I was measuring the servings of what I was eating on a scale. I was doing everything to try to control all of my body, so that maybe my emotions and my mind could stabilize, and that I was feeding myself the right foods and getting the right sleep. I was doing all this because I was going insane, and I was losing grip of reality. And so this book is going to be my journey through self-help, and how I had a very eclectic morning routine and life, and it was not helping. Chapter 5 is called What My Dad Taught Me. And it's crazy that Dad makes this book. And I told you this book is not linear. It doesn't just go down in a timeline. This is going to be a chapter about my dad and what he taught me. And what did he teach me? Well, it might not be what you think, because yes, he taught me so much about life and love and integrity and what it might be like to be a man. But we lost my dad in 2014. So it was also my first deep grief, my first big experience of loss. And this is going to go through the details of that loss and how it impacted our family and devastated our family in so many ways, to lose our leader, to lose the man of the house, to lose the man that I relied on for advice, for a phone call. If I needed to know something, Dad was there. He answered. He had the advice I needed. And when you lose that, when that carpet is pulled out from underneath you, your world kind of goes into shambles. So what Dad taught me ultimately through this, in the context of this book, is how there's a secret to this chapter that I hope you make it this far and see the secret. I don't want to reveal it, but it's pretty crazy. And ultimately, what I learned from Dad was how to grieve, so that just a few years later, when we lost River, it wasn't my first time to do it. So chapter 6 is called Rivers in the Wasteland. And this is we're back, I'm performing, I'm doing interviews, and this is going to go into detail about the time when we revealed to the public what was happening. and we were declining interviews, and everyone, it seemed like so many media outlets wanted to interview me. And as we were saying no, and Tyler, my brother, was fielding this and saying no to so many interviews, they were running their own story. And on all of those news websites and stations and radio programs and podcasts, then the haters started coming. And when the haters came, they were not related to me at all, or not a fan at all. I started seeing that. So then people tried to shield me from seeing the haters, but it was a tough season, because as tough as I wanted to be, and as mentally strong as I wanted to be, as I was going through my self-help phase, I was also seeing the haters. And the truth is, and what I reveal in this chapter is, the biggest problem with the haters was that I kind of believed them. At least I wanted to believe them. The haters that said I was an irresponsible dad, I believed that. The haters that said I was guilty of a crime, I believed that too. So when they said it, one of the hardest things about hearing from the haters, the hardest thing about it was, I agreed with them. I thought they were right. And the people that loved me, that said, no, you need to get rid of your guilt. It is not your fault. This was an accident. The problem was, I didn't believe them, the people that loved me. I would rather believe the haters. And that's what was so devastating about it. The end of chapter 6 is going to show that my evolution from self-help amidst the haters led me to my devices, my other ways of coping, the different things that I did to cope with the loss itself. And then that led me to chapter 7. Chapter 7 is called The Dark Night of the Soul. This is a chapter that I didn't want to write. In fact, this is a chapter that I thought, maybe I can get by without writing it at all. Maybe I can get by without anyone knowing it. And I told a friend of mine about this. Amber didn't know about it. Nobody in the family knew about it. The people that were involved didn't know about it. But I told a friend, a pastor, and he said, you need to write that in a book, because there might be people that have a similar situation. They need to know that. And I said, you know what? You're right. I need to write chapter 7, The Dark Night of the Soul. This is when everything came unglued. This is when I hit rock bottom. And it was the darkest night of my life. There is no doubt. And after I finished it, I still didn't tell Amber. I still didn't tell my family until the first draft of the book started getting put together. And I called Amber and I said, I need to tell you something. Before you check out the original draft of this book, I need you to know something. There's a chapter in there that's going to get really dark. It's going to get really deep, very personal. And I need to tell you about it before everyone else starts hearing about it. And eventually, the world that reads this book hears about it. So I told her, she cried, I cried with her, but we both agreed it needed to be in here. That's chapter 7. Chapter 8 is called Rebirth. This is the hinge of the book. It's going to happen right in the middle. The book doesn't happen, it doesn't work, nothing makes sense without chapter 8, because everything leading up to the book is climbing up the mountain, and the peak of the mountain is chapter 8. This is when God met me where I was. This is where God rescued me in a profound way. And it was almost, in a way, it was separate from the river event completely. But the way that it happened was very specific. And I have laid it out. Some of you might have heard pieces of the story, but I've laid it out in full detail, exactly what happened and how it happened in chapter 8. It changed my life forever. It changed the course, the direction of my life that a lot of you know from me now happened on this date, on this specific event in chapter 8. It's called Rebirth, and it changed everything. Chapter 9 is called Peace Like a River. Peace Like a River is going to take us with the perspective of the rebirth, with the new version of me, back to the hospital with Riv. And I'm going to reveal some things that I've never talked about in public, that happened in the hospital with Riv, things that we learned, and with a better understanding, seeing it through the lens of the rebirth, everything was happening. All of a sudden, my pain had a purpose. There was a meaning. It was not wasted. It wasn't meaningless. But my pain and the suffering and everything we went through, as I walked through chapter 9, I started realizing it was there for a reason. It was working for me. It can be working for you too. And that's the reason I wrote chapter 9. That's the reason ultimately I wrote this book, so people that read this can hear it and they can believe it and they can know your pain is working for you. Your pain has a purpose. Chapter 10, the Phoenix. It's crazy because the few people that have actually read this book, they'll text me or they'll call me and they'll say, man, I'm into your book. It's so good. It's like I'm just blown away by the story. And I'm like, thank you. What part are you on? And they're like, yeah, it just happened. Like the rebirth just happened. And I'm like, oh, it hadn't even gotten good yet. And that's what's crazy. I love this book. I'm very biased, but it has so many wrinkles. It has so many new turns. And so just when you think we've peaked and we've reached the pinnacle of what could happen, then it takes a new turn that goes a completely new direction. And so the Phoenix is what happens in chapter 10. And what is happening in the background of the rebirth and the growth, what is happening is a new baby. Amber and I are working on and trying to walk through the story and the path in our future of what it would look like with another baby. And we have so many obstacles. The odds are impossible to have another baby. I mean, you could say it that way. The odds were impossible. And chapter 10 is going to walk through Amber and her strength and what it took and what she went through and how God brought her through this, even through a miscarriage that was devastating after the loss of a child, to have a miscarriage after that while we were living in an RV in a barn with bugs in the Texas heat. She emerges from the ashes like a phoenix. Chapter 10 ends with an unexplainable dream that Lincoln has. And I can't wait for you guys to read what that dream was in detail. And that leads us into chapter 11, which is, if you're reading the book so far and you're going through this and you're like, man, I really like this book, you haven't gotten to chapter 11 yet, the Maverick. A lot of you know, that if you're watching this video, you probably know me. And I say that in a way that there's a lot of people, hopefully, Lord willing, there's a lot of people that read this book that don't know me before they read it. But if you're watching this video, you probably already know me. And so you know my story and you know we have Maverick. But I'm excited for the people that don't know that, for the people that have no clue who I am and they're just walking through this and they're like, oh, this poor guy. And then all of a sudden the story just gets crazy. And then there's this Maverick story that just comes out of nowhere. And I like to say that, River's on the cover and River's got the hook, for the song. But it's really a story about Maverick. And you can look at this whole book in a way that the whole book is leading up to Maverick. Why? I don't know. It's something, there's things in life I cannot explain. I can't put into words. But in a way, this whole book is leading towards this redemption in the form of Maverick. And Maverick came with an absolute vengeance against impossible odds. But the fact that we even have this little unbranded calf, which is what the word Maverick means, is mind-blowing to me. And it is something that I'll never fully begin to understand. But this is the full story of Mav, and from the conception of the idea of having a baby all the way until we actually delivered and had this little miracle kid. Chapter 12 is called The Living Water. And we're going to get closer to modern day. And I'm going to explore the idea of what it means to have a child like Maverick that exists because another one doesn't. because River's not here. And to be able to trade Maverick, of course we love, would be to trade him for River, who of course we love, would be to say that there is no more Maverick. And then to be able to say we want Maverick would be us saying that we don't want River. And that is a conundrum in my mind that I can't even begin to understand. But I do know that that's the way it is. And I do know that it's God's will because it's happening. And it did happen. And his will always, his purpose always succeeds. It is what it is. And so I'm left to unpack this in this book and try to understand why loss is a necessary part of life. And to try to tell you, the reader, that as you read this and I tell you your pain has a purpose, you might not see that redemption yet. Maybe you haven't lived long enough. But if you continue down the path and you continue to surrender, which is such a big theme of this book, as you continue to surrender, you'll see that loss is a necessary part of life. If you had your favorite movie and you take away all the bad parts, you take away the bad guy, you're left with a very boring movie. And there's no way to redeem it. There's no way for the good guy to be good. There's no way for the good guy to be redeemed in the end if there wasn't the suffering or the bad guy, or the bad situation in the middle of it. And so that's the case with you, and that's the case with me. And I'm going to walk through that in this last chapter. And then I hope that as the mirror is turned back to you, you could close this book and you hear the story of me not only finding hope in the midst of the tragedy, but then taking this to the next level, which is what most of you know me now, being a preacher and going through seminary and going and traveling to different churches and bringing the gospel to people. And the beginning of that is at the end of this book, which leads me to right now. And this is so important. This book is the most important piece of media out of everything I've done, out of 24 years of touring and making 10 albums and live albums and countless music videos and documentaries. This is the most important piece of media I've ever done. And I feel so convicted by that thought that I'm willing to give up touring and give up music, all of it, to be able to take this book to you and be able to give it to you and say, read it. Let's have a conversation. If you don't know what to do right now, if you're suffering, if you're in pain, if you're grieving right now, read this book and then let's talk. Let this be a conversation starter. Let it be a conversation starter for somebody in your family or one of your friends or somebody that you know that is hurting right now. I want them to read this book and then let's talk. That's how important this is to me.